She left as calmly as she had come, like their time together was nothing more than a fleeting dream. Yet he knew, from that moment on, his heart would never be whole again. If you enjoy my way of explaining and storytelling, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really motivates me to keep creating. Violet Spirit hesitated for a brief moment before giving a slight nod. Indeed, it would be improper to leave now. If you were to do so, it could provoke the 3 deity transformation cultivators. However, they seem quite wary of you. Even if we remain here for a few more days, there should be no issue. Now that her freedom had been restored, Violet Spirit's clarity and composure returned at once. Her intelligence and decisiveness resurfaced, and she once again became the fairy Violet Spirit who had once ventured through the world on her own. Hanli observed the renewed vitality in her eyes and gave a faint smile before turning and heading back toward the palace. Violet Spirit watched his departing figure. A thought seemed to cross her mind, and a faint blush rose to her cheeks. She gently bit her lower lip, then followed after him toward the palace. 3 days later, a ceremony was held within the Devil Palace. The other 2 beautiful female cultivators were formally accepted as Hu Qinglei's concubines. During the ceremony, an additional 20 to 30 devilish and itinerant cultivators arrived. Even the weakest among them were at the mid-nascent soul stage, while several late-nascent soul cultivators were also present. This gathering left a strong impression on Han Li. Such a lineup could not possibly be assembled in the Heavenly South region. Upon arrival, these cultivators were naturally astonished to see the 3 deity transformation cultivators treating Han Li as an equal. After hearing accounts of his past actions from those who had arrived earlier, their surprise deepened. They treated him with the same respect they reserved for deity transformation cultivators. After all, this was someone who had nearly destroyed the yin-sifting sect single-handedly, taken a concubine from Hu Qinglei, and endured one of Hu Qinglei's most powerful attacks. He was not someone to provoke. Over these 3 days, Hu Qinglei's attitude toward Han Li remained calm and unchanged. He did not mention anything related to Violet Spirit. Han Li felt some relief, though he maintained constant vigilance throughout the period. Violet Spirit also stayed close to him and did not wander far. Naturally, Han Li had no objections to her presence. Once the ceremony concluded, Han Li immediately bade farewell to Xianxia and the others. Together with Violet Spirit, he left the Devil Palace and Devil Cliff Mountain. Soon after, the 2 of them vanished without a trace. 3 months later, atop a nameless scenic mountain, a young man in azure robes stood quietly upon a large rock, gazing into the distance. This young man was none other than Han Li, who had departed from Devil Cliff Mountain months prior. His expression was calm, yet a trace of unrest lingered in his eyes. He slowly raised his hands and looked at them in silence. Just a day earlier, those hands had touched Violet Spirit's smooth, warm skin. The memory remained vivid, stirring his blood slightly. Yet now she had already left, leaving him alone on this mountain. After leaving the Heavenly Devil sect, the 2 had settled here. They spent their time exchanging experiences from the period since their separation. A subtle attraction had always existed between them. After living together in close proximity for several months, they eventually lost restraint and gave in to their impulses. Afterward, Violet Spirit made her stance clear. Han Li already had a Dao companion, and she was unwilling to become anyone's concubine. Their paths were destined to diverge. However, she would never give her heart to another man, nor would she seek a Dao companion. Instead, she would devote herself entirely to cultivation and the pursuit of the great Dao. Having spoken these words calmly, she departed. Han Li possessed the strength to force her to stay. However, he saw the resolve within her and chose not to act. Now, standing atop the mountain and recalling the past 3 months, a sense of loss arose within him, accompanied by a faint ache in his heart. He understood that his mental state had become unstable. Yet he did not suppress it immediately, allowing himself to experience the lingering emotions. After a long time, the confusion and heaviness in his eyes gradually faded. His gaze regained clarity. "I suppose it was never meant to be," Han Li murmured. With that, his body transformed into a streak of azure light. He soared into the sky and vanished in an instant. The fiery hell was one of the 7 restricted regions of Great Jin, located in its southeastern territory. It had existed since ancient times. This land of flames spanned an area comparable to half a state. Black and red were the only colors present. Countless volcanoes of varying sizes were scattered across the vast expanse. Some volcanoes rose over 100,000 feet high, while others were only slightly over 1,000 feet, resembling hills more than true volcanoes. Certain volcanoes remained active with molten lava bubbling within their craters. Others had long gone dormant. Still others were in the midst of eruption, rumbling continuously as lava surged into the sky. Above this land, thick black-red clouds of fire constantly obscured the sky. The ground was layered with deep accumulations of ash, turning it entirely black. The air was filled with the sharp scent of sulfur, and the temperature far exceeded that of the outside world. Despite this hostile environment, cultivators frequently appeared here. Some descended from the sky to gather materials, while others entered the craters of volcanoes directly. Those who ventured into the volcanoes were all powerful cultivators. Although the fiery hell was extremely dangerous, it was rich in fire attribute materials. However, the true restricted area was not the entire region, but rather a central expanse of mountain ranges. There, a vast red mist stretched across tens of thousands of kilometers. This mist marked the true forbidden zone. Very few cultivators who entered it ever returned. As a result, almost no one was seen near that area. On this day, however, a streak of azure light suddenly appeared rushing toward the edge of the fiery mist. In an instant, it stopped just over 1,000 feet away. The azure light dissipated, revealing a young male cultivator. It was Han Li who had stabilized his mental state and arrived here after several months of travel. Upon appearing, he surveyed his surroundings before turning his attention to the sea of red mist. This mist differed greatly from others he had encountered. Its scale was immense, and it remained completely still, with no visible movement or sound. Han Li clasped his hands behind his back and observed it for a moment. Then, without hesitation, azure light flashed around him as he entered the mist. The moment he stepped inside, violent explosions erupted where his protective azure light met the red mist. Red and azure light intertwined as the clashes intensified. Han Li was slightly startled. After advancing over 1,000 feet, his expression grew serious. He tapped his storage pouch. A flash of red light followed. More than a dozen crimson streaks shot out, transforming into translucent, glowing cylindrical pillars. Each pillar was about a foot long, with lifelike crimson worm carvings on their surfaces. These were treasures refined from the fire dragon pillars obtained in the Kunwu Mountains. Han Li formed a hand seal and pointed forward. The pillars spun briefly before flying outward, stopping about 10 feet away from him. A burst of red light emerged. The carved worms opened their mouths and released beams of crimson light, forming a protective barrier around Han Li. Upon contact with this barrier, the red mist ceased its explosive reactions. Han Li moved through it smoothly. A faint look of satisfaction appeared in his eyes as he increased his speed. Within the fiery mist, spiritual sense was heavily restricted. Even with Han Li's powerful perception, he could only sense a limited area. For ordinary late-nascent soul cultivators, the restriction would be even greater. It confirmed that his decision to come here only after reaching this stage had been prudent. Han Li had come in search of pure sun flame essence, a key material for refining returning sun water. After searching the soul of Master Arctic Dragon's nascent soul, he learned that a strand of pure sun flame essence existed within this restricted region. However, it was hidden in a highly dangerous location. Only after reaching the peak of the late nascent soul stage did he feel confident enough to seek it. Returning sun water was extremely important to him. Although he had traded some glacial quintessence for Violet Spirit's freedom, he still possessed enough to refine several portions of the medicine. However, without the pure sun flame essence, refinement would be impossible. Obtaining it would not be easy. Otherwise, Master Arctic Dragon would have acquired it long ago. Han Li possessed the Gratian True Flame. With it obtaining the Purson flame essence was not impossible. That was why he had chosen to come. This fiery mist was one of Great Jin's 7 restricted areas. It was inherently dangerous. Beneath it, powerful fire attribute demon beasts roamed the mountains. Many were of the 6th and 7th grade. Even nascent soul cultivators could fall if surrounded. Moreover, the greatest danger within this mist was not the demon beasts. As this thought crossed his mind, Han Li suddenly sensed something. A cold glint flashed in his eyes as he flicked his finger. Golden light appeared, and a streak of sword chi shot into the red mist. A sharp, unusual cry suddenly rang out. From within the mist, a dark figure staggered forward, revealing itself to be a red demon beast several feet long. It had a pair of blue eyes and a purple comb atop its head. One of its wings was soaked in blood, and from a fist-sized puncture wound, fresh blood poured out violently. Despite its injuries, the beast remained extremely aggressive. It lunged straight toward Han Li without hesitation. Han Li was not surprised. Fire attribute demon beasts were typically far more violent and ferocious than other types. He let out a faint sigh and casually flicked his fingers. 5 thin red threads shot forth instantly. They pierced multiple parts of the beast's body before wrapping tightly around it and constricting with force. A flash of red light followed, and the demon beast was cleanly sliced into several pieces. This was the power of Han Li's fire spirit threads. Against weaker opponents like this fiery bird, their lethality was unmistakable. Han Li waved his hand and the red threads returned, vanishing into his palm. As he continued deeper into the sea of mist, demon beasts began to appear more frequently. Before long, he had already slain over 10 of them. At one point, 5 or 6 fire apes, each nearly 10 feet tall, attacked him simultaneously. An ordinary early nascent soul cultivator would have struggled under such circumstances, but Han Li handled it with ease. He simply opened his mouth and released several inch-long flying swords. The fire apes were swiftly cut down. However, after advancing further, he finally encountered a genuine obstacle. Several hundred feet ahead, a red ball of light about 10 feet in size hovered in the air. It shimmered constantly, shifting forms without stability. Sometimes a tiger, sometimes a wolf, as if it possessed no fixed shape. Han Li observed it with a cold expression before raising his hand. Several streaks of golden sword chi shot forward. Golden light flashed, slicing the creature into pieces. Yet the scattered red light quickly gathered again, restoring itself without difficulty. Han Li's brows furrowed. He formed a hand seal and abruptly opened his mouth, releasing a pillar of purple light. It pierced through the ball of light in an instant, leaving behind a hole the size of a large bowl. This was a technique he had recently mastered after advancing to the late nascent soul stage. It involved compressing the purple apex flames he had refined and releasing them through immense spiritual power. Its destructive force was considerable. Although the red ball of light still regenerated, the process was noticeably slower this time. So the rumors were accurate. This malicious fire spirit is indeed troublesome. Even my glacial flame, which should suppress it by attribute, is not very effective. No wonder Master Arctic Dragon was wary of it, Han Li murmured. At that moment, the red ball of light transformed into a crimson ghostly figure. Flames erupted from its mouth as it charged toward Han Li. Han Li's expression grew serious. He waved his hand, and a massive azure hand appeared above the ghost. It descended like lightning, grasping the figure firmly. The azure fingers tightened, crushing the ghost's body. Yet in the next instant, the red light gathered again and restored itself. A faint, cold smile appeared on Han Li's face. He reached toward his storage pouch, preparing to summon a treasure. But at that exact moment, a clear cry sounded from within his body. Crimson light flashed on his shoulder, and a small crimson bird, only a few inches in size, appeared out of thin air. Han Li paused slightly. This bird was the spirit beast formed from the great true flame. A trace of surprise surfaced in his eyes. Before he could determine why the fire raven had emerged on its own, it suddenly spread its wings and shot toward the red light. As it flew, its body rapidly expanded, growing to several feet in size within moments. It opened its beak and pecked at the red ball. To Han Li's surprise, the bird successfully tore a piece from the intangible light. After several more pecks, a large hole appeared in the ball of light, and its regenerative ability weakened significantly. The malicious fire spirit showed no sign of intelligence or pain. Instead of fleeing, it continued shifting forms, repeatedly attempting to counter the fire raven. The fire raven gripped it tightly with its talons and continued pecking relentlessly regardless of its form. In a short time, the ball of light had been reduced to nearly half its original size. Han Li chuckled softly. He had not expected the Gratian fire raven to be the natural counter to these malicious fire spirits. This would save him considerable effort. With that thought, he simply watched calmly. It did not take long before the fire raven completely devoured the ball of light. Afterward, it let out a long cry and returned to Han Li's shoulder. It began to preen its feathers, showing no intention of re-entering his body immediately. There were certainly more malicious fire spirits within this misty region. Han Li had no intention of forcing it back, so he continued forward. The mountain range beneath the sea of mist was vast beyond measure. With his spiritual sense restricted, Han Li did not dare move too quickly. It took him 3 full days to reach his destination, a massive extinct volcano. Along the way, he had slain at least 70 to 80 demon beasts, possibly more than 100. Some had reached the peak of the 7th grade, only a step away from the 8th. 8th grade demon beasts would gain intelligence and typically leave the fiery hell to seek better cultivation grounds. As for malicious fire spirits, he encountered only 2 more. Both were devoured by the fire raven without difficulty. However, when passing over a fiery lake, Han Li was forced to slow down. The lake would occasionally erupt with pillars of crimson fire, without warning, each carrying considerable power. Though he was not afraid of the flames, he had no intention of wasting unnecessary magic power. Thus, he proceeded cautiously across the area. Now Han Li stood at the edge of the extinct volcano, arms folded as he looked ahead. He patted his storage pouch, producing a thick stack of formation flags and plates. With a casual motion, he tossed them behind him. Silver light flashed and another Han Li appeared. This figure raised its hand, summoning a wave of silver light that caught all the formation tools. This was the humanoid puppet controlled by Han Li's second nascent soul. Its body flickered and transformed into a streak of silver light disappearing into the mist. Meanwhile, Han Li sat down cross-legged, closing his eyes in meditation. A short while later, the puppet returned empty-handed. Han Li opened his eyes, glanced at it, and nodded. The puppet vanished once again. Brilliant spiritual light erupted from Han Li's body as he transformed into a streak of azure light, shooting into the air. After a few flashes, he arrived at the center of the volcanic crater. The light faded. Han Li examined his surroundings, then raised his hand and released a white object. It spun in mid-air, rapidly expanding within a burst of spiritual light. In an instant, it grew to over 100 feet tall before crashing to the ground, causing the earth to tremble slightly. It was extremely heavy. As the light faded, a jade sacrificial pillar appeared covered in intricate runes. It was clearly a treasure. Han Li flipped his hand again, revealing a small blue cauldron. He began chanting, forming incantation seals and directing them into the cauldron. The cauldron spun and emitted dazzling spiritual light, rapidly expanding to around 10 feet in size. Han Li flicked his finger and the lid flew off. A buzzing sound emerged from within, followed by a burst of blue light that spread outward. Where the blue light passed, a layer of shimmering ice formed across the ground. This was his celestial blue flames. The cauldron was the replica spirit treasure he had obtained from Master Arctic Dragon, the celestial blue cauldron. Only 2 such cauldrons existed, both in Han Li's possession. As the blue light spread, the surrounding red mist retreated, and the crater became significantly clearer. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face. He pointed at the cauldron, guiding it to land at the center of the sacrificial altar. At the same time, he took out a palm-sized blue formation plate and rapidly cast several seals. A thunderous boom erupted from the ground. A massive formation of multicolored spiritual light appeared with the altar at its center. It seemed as though the formation and the cauldron had always been one, with endless celestial blue flames flowing outward. Blue ice soon covered the entire crater. Han Li's expression turned serious. He pointed repeatedly at the formation plate. A deafening roar followed as dozens of blue light pillars shot into the sky around the crater, forming a vast cage that sealed the entire area. Each pillar shimmered with green light and extended hundreds of feet upward, creating an imposing and formidable scene. Han Li flicked his sleeve, and the other small blue cauldron shot forth as well, expanding rapidly as it flew through the air. At his direction, the coffin rose and hovered above the massive formation, only coming to a halt at an altitude of over 200 feet. A flash of silver light appeared, and the humanoid puppet manifested, standing motionlessly on one corner of the cauldron. Han Li gave a slight nod upon seeing this, then abruptly tapped one of the spirit beast pouches at his waist. A gust of frigid wind surged outward, and 12 four-winged centipedes emerged, each several feet long. They were his 12 six-winged frost centipedes. The moment they appeared, they opened their mouths and released streams of icy wind, sending dense white mist rising high into the air. Soon their forms were concealed within the mist. They separated and flew toward different corners of the light cage, taking up their positions. With these arrangements complete, Han Li felt somewhat reassured. Even so, he did not allow himself to relax. He carefully inspected the formation once more. After confirming that there were no issues, he stood at a designated point and formed a hand seal. A layer of purple flames emerged over his body, and he slowly sank into the ground as if he were nothing more than an illusion, vanishing from sight in an instant. Within the massive light cage, only the 2 cauldrons, the unmoving humanoid puppet, and 12 drifting clouds of white mist remained. Meanwhile, Han Li had already descended several hundred feet underground, arriving within a vast expanse of blazing crimson lava. The temperature here was sufficient to melt a human into nothingness within seconds. Yet Han Li remained unharmed within his cocoon of purple apex flames. However, as the glacial nature of his flames clashed with the surrounding lava, continuous rumbling sounds, like unending thunder, echoed nearby. The noise was somewhat irritating. It was not that Han Li was unwilling to switch to the barrier formed by his fire dragon pillars. A fire attribute barrier would naturally merge with the lava more easily. However, maintaining stable conditions within such intense heat would consume excessive magic power. By comparison, using his glacial flames was far more efficient. Thus, he had no intention of deploying that barrier before encountering the Purison flame essence. Although he had extended his spiritual sense to its maximum, the surrounding lava severely limited its range, restricting it to roughly 1,000 feet. Han Li could not help but let out a faint sigh. It was no wonder that Master Arctic Dragon had failed repeatedly to obtain the Purison flame essence, despite knowing it resided within this volcano, eventually abandoning the effort altogether. In such an environment, even a late nascent soul cultivator would struggle to capture a wisp of flame essence that possessed its own spiritual nature. Only a deity transformation cultivator would have a realistic chance. Despite his extensive preparations, Han Li still lacked confidence in his success. At that moment, he lightly patted the Gratian fire raven perched on his shoulder. The raven spread its wings and flew out of the purple flame barrier, disappearing silently into the lava ahead. The entire process was soundless. The fire raven moved through the lava without obstruction, completely unaffected by the intense heat. Han Li was briefly taken aback. Then a trace of excitement rose within him. The Gratian true flame was one of the most powerful yin attribute existences in the human realm, and it seemed capable of existing even within lava. As one of the 3 true spirit flames, it clearly contained hidden mysteries. If given the opportunity in the future, he would need to study it in detail. The Gratian true flame was born from extreme cold, while the Purison flame essence was born from extreme heat. Yin and yang naturally attracted one another. If the flame essence were nearby, it would inevitably be drawn toward the Gratian fire raven. With this in mind, Han Li followed at a distance. using the raven as the focal point while searching the lava with the volcanic crater as the center. Several days passed. He had nearly searched the entire region, spanning over 5,000 kilometers in radius. In particular, he thoroughly investigated the locations where Master Arctic Dragon had previously sighted the flame essence. However, there were no results. He had no choice but to expand the search area, yet the Purson flame essence remained nowhere to be found, as if it did not exist. A month later, Han Li was searching tens of thousands of kilometers away from the crater. His expression remained calm, but impatience had begun to build within him. Day after day, he traversed the lava surrounded by endless crimson. At the same time, he continuously maintained his spiritual sense at full capacity, consuming a vast amount of magic power. Under such conditions, anyone would find it difficult to endure. Just as he was considering returning to the surface to recover his spiritual power, his expression suddenly shifted. A hint of surprise and restrained excitement appeared in his eyes. He immediately tapped a storage pouch, summoning a small black vial containing the unbroken Cinque Devils. The vial tilted, releasing the 5 devils into the lava. They appeared somewhat uncomfortable, but the grayish-white, devilish chi surrounding them shielded them from the heat. Han Li began chanting. The 5 devils transformed into ghostly heads and scattered into the lava in different directions. He then flicked his sleeve again, releasing the fire dragon pillars. A crimson light barrier formed around him. At the same time, his body blurred and became indistinct, blending completely into the surrounding lava. The area fell silent aside from the slow movement of molten currents. About 10 minutes later, a streak of crimson light flashed. The Gratian fire raven emerged from the lava, then dove back down in another direction. Almost simultaneously, the surrounding lava surged violently. The temperature rose sharply, more than doubling. A flash of silver light followed as something pursued closely behind the raven. As the silver light vanished, the lava gradually returned to normal, though the heat remained intense. At that moment, a red flash appeared, and Han Li emerged within his barrier. A faint look of satisfaction on his face as he pursued the direction of the silver light. The 3 figures chased one another in sequence, covering tens of thousands of kilometers within a few hours, eventually nearing the volcanic crater where the formation had been set. At this point, an issue arose. The Gratian fire raven remained agile and unaffected by the lava, but it was slightly slower than the silver light. After a prolonged pursuit, the silver light finally closed the gap when they were still nearly 10 kilometers from the crater. The silver light lunged forward, colliding with the fire raven. Crimson and silver lights intertwined. Han Li did not dare approach, fearing he might startle it. However, through his spiritual connection, he was finally able to clearly see the silver light. It was a miniature Pegasus, only a few inches in size. Its body was pure white, while its wings shimmered with silver radiance. Upon catching up, the Pegasus summoned countless silver flame flowers across its wings. This was the manifestation of the Purson flame essence. When the Gratian fire raven was first born, it had been extremely weak, allowing Han Li to subdue it easily. After absorbing immense myriad-year glacial chi in the profound jade cave, it had grown significantly stronger. Its current strength was comparable to the Purson flame essence. However, the Pegasus could draw upon the boundless power of the surrounding lava, giving it a clear advantage. In contrast, the fire raven had to expend energy to resist the heat, placing it at a disadvantage. After only a few exchanges, it was already being suppressed. Han Li frowned slightly. Neither he nor the 5 devils could intervene. Any interference would likely scare the flame essence away. From Master Arctic Dragon's memories, he knew the Purson flame essence was extremely cautious and would flee at the slightest disturbance. Moreover, its flame movement technique allowed it to move through lava almost undetectably. If it escaped, there would be no second chance. If startled once, it was uncertain whether the fire raven could lure it again. Thus, even as the raven struggled, Han Li did not act. Instead, his mind worked rapidly, searching for a solution. Suddenly, an idea formed. He made a hand seal and expelled a white bead, the snow crystal pearl, nurtured by the purple apex flames. After casting several incantations, the pearl shot forward as a streak of white light. It reached the battlefield instantly and descended between the two. The Pegasus was startled. With a flap of its wings, it vanished within silver flames and reappeared over 200 feet away, watching the pearl cautiously. The Gratian fire raven, however, did not retreat. It seized the opportunity, lunged forward and swallowed the pearl. Brilliant crimson light erupted from its body. Without hesitation, it immediately resumed fleeing. The Pegasus hesitated briefly, scanning its surroundings. After confirming no threat, it spread its wings and resumed pursuit. However, empowered by the purple apex flames within the snow crystal pearl, the fire raven's speed increased significantly, allowing it to maintain distance. In the blink of an eye, both reached the volcanic crater. The fire raven immediately shot upward toward the surface. The Pegasus had pursued the fire raven for a long time, and it was naturally unwilling to abandon the chase. Without hesitation, it spread its wings and ascended rapidly toward the surface. Both were fire spirits, so the dense layers of earth posed no obstruction to them. Moments later, the two fire spirits burst out from the ground, one after the other, appearing directly within the vast cage of light. As soon as the Purison flame essence emerged, it sensed that something was wrong. However, it was already too late. The humanoid puppet had long since prepared for this moment. It abruptly stomped down on the celestial blue cauldron beneath its feet. Instantly, a surge of blue flames erupted, transforming in the blink of an eye into a blue glacial worm. At the same time, the Gratian fire raven counterattacked. It turned around and opened its beak, expelling the snow crystal pearl. Simultaneously, the entire formation was activated by the humanoid puppet. Upon witnessing this, the Purison flame essence immediately attempted to retreat back into the lava. The volcanic crater it had emerged from, along with the fire raven, had been deliberately left free of blue ice. However, as the formation activated, blue ice began sealing that crater as well. Nevertheless, the speed at which the ice spread was far inferior to the retreating speed of the Purison flame essence. Just as the miniature Pegasus was about to vanish into the ground, a look of alarm suddenly appeared in its eyes. It abruptly spread its wings, disappearing from its original position and reappearing over 200 feet away. At almost the same moment, 5 pillars of light in different colors shot upward from the ground below. 5 bursts of grayish-white devilish chi surged forth, transforming into 5 ghostly heads about a foot in size. They were the unbroken Cinque Devils. Hanli also rose slowly from beneath the ground. By this point, the entire crater had been sealed under a thick layer of blue ice due to the formation. Standing atop the ice, Han Li lifted his head, his expression calm and focused. The glacial worm formed from the celestial blue flames, the Gratian fire raven, and the 5 ghostly heads all converged toward the Pegasus. However, just as recorded in Master Arctic Dragon's memories, the Purison flame essence was extremely agile. It flickered through the air like an untraceable streak of silver light. Only the Gratian fire raven could keep pace with it. The 5 devils and the glacial worm were clearly slower. Yet this time the Pegasus was being suppressed by the glacial chi emitted by the cage of celestial blue flames. With the enhancement from Han Li's snow crystal pearl, the fire raven was now slightly faster than the Purison flame essence. If not for the Pegasus's exceptionally unpredictable movement techniques, it would have already been captured. Even so, within a short time, it was struck several times by the crimson light expelled from the fire raven's mouth, suffering minor injuries. Still, the Pegasus chose to endure these attacks rather than retaliate, as counterattacking would slow it down and allow the 5 devils and the glacial worm to catch up. Below, Han Li stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching quietly. Meanwhile, the humanoid puppet maintained the formation and controlled the glacial worm without expression. Suddenly, the Pegasus seized an opportunity. After taking another strike from the fire raven, it plunged toward the ground at high speed. It reached the surface in an instant and attempted to use a movement technique to escape. However, the moment its body touched the blue ice, it faltered slightly. In that brief instant of delay, a streak of crimson light and a surge of blue glacial mist rushed toward it. At the same time, a sharp, unsettling cry rang out. A trace of alarm appeared in the Pegasus's eyes, but it was too late to evade. It reacted immediately, frantically flapping its wings and creating numerous silver flower-like bursts of light that enveloped its body, preparing to withstand the attacks. Two dull impacts sounded in quick succession as the crimson light and blue mist struck the silver flowers. To Han Li's surprise, the Pegasus used the force of the impacts to propel itself forward, reappearing over 100 feet away in an instant. It steadied itself briefly before escaping again as a streak of silver light. Although it was still moving at high speed, Han Li's bright-sight spirit eyes allowed him to see clearly that a portion of one wing was missing, and part of one leg had been severed. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face. He finally took action. Azure and white light flashed behind him as a pair of wings manifested. With a gentle flap, a breeze stirred and his figure vanished completely. At the same time, the Great-In Fire Raven lunged again at the Purison Flame essence. However, the Pegasus had already widened the distance by borrowing the earlier momentum. After several flashes, it reached the edge of the cage at full speed. A pillar of blue light blocked its path, so it attempted to circle around it. But the humanoid puppet immediately formed a hand seal. The pillars erupted with radiant light, and strands of light shot out, forming a dense net that sealed off the Pegasus's escape route. Startled, the Pegasus had no time to retreat. It released dozens of silver flowers toward the net while continuing forward at full speed, intending to break through by force. However, it failed to notice that two clouds of white mist had already formed above it. The mist surged, releasing two blasts of glacial wind, followed immediately by two snow-white centipedes shooting forward like lightning. These were two of the 6-winged frost centipedes Han Li had prepared in advance. Forced to evade, the Pegasus changed direction. At that moment, the Fire Raven, the 5 devils, and the glacial worm closed in once more. But just as it altered its course, a flash of black light appeared before it. A translucent black blade sliced through its body in an instant. Shock and fear appeared in its eyes as its body was cleanly cut in half. The two halves immediately reverted to silver flames and rejoined, reforming into the miniature Pegasus. However, its body was now faint and unstable, clearly unable to fully restore itself. The ambush from the Devil Essence dagger had been highly effective. At that moment, a low thunderclap sounded. An arc of azure lightning flashed as Han Li appeared overhead, his fingers flicking rapidly. 10 fiery threads shot forward, piercing the Pegasus instantly. At the same time, Han Li began chanting, and the threads tightened, binding the Pegasus firmly. Caught off guard, it was unable to resist. Han Li's eyes lit up with satisfaction. He flipped his hand, summoning a stack of restriction talismans prepared in advance. Over a dozen streaks of light flew toward the Pegasus. If these talismans adhered successfully, the fire spirit would have no chance of escape. However, an unexpected change occurred. The bound Pegasus suddenly let out a desperate neigh. Brilliant silver light erupted from its body, forcibly shaking off the fiery threads, which instead shot toward the incoming talismans. Explosions rang out as all the talismans were destroyed. The fiery threads continued toward Han Li. Even Han Li was briefly startled, but he reacted immediately, raising a hand and drawing the threads back into his grasp. At the same time, the Pegasus attempted to flee again. Han Li's expression turned cold as he let out a sharp harumph. At the sound, the Pegasus trembled, its body falling uncontrollably toward the ground. Han Li had used the spirit stun thorn. With a flap of his wings, Han Li vanished and reappeared beneath the falling Pegasus. This time he did not use any treasures. Instead, he reached out. A massive hand formed from purple flames appeared, seizing the Pegasus tightly. Brilliant purple glacial light erupted as a block of purple ice instantly sealed the fire spirit within. At that moment, the Great-In Fire Raven and the glacial worm arrived, plunging into the ice and merging with it. Almost simultaneously, the Pegasus recovered from the spirit stun thorn. Silver flames surged violently as it struggled to break free. However, with the Gratian true flame integrated into the ice escape was impossible in the short term. The glacial worm and fire raven moved freely within, releasing waves of glacial qi to suppress the silver flames. The five devils also arrived. They each exhaled a different type of glacial flame, which combined into a five-colored flame that struck the Pegasus. Upon contact, the Pegasus slowed drastically. In contrast, the glacial worm and fire raven remained unaffected. Instead, their glacial qi intensified. Under this continuous assault, the Purisun flame essence gradually weakened, its movement slowing further as its aura diminished. Seeing this, Han Li waved his sleeve, releasing another dozen talismans. They pierced the ice and adhered to the Pegasus. At last, the fire spirit abandoned resistance. The silver light around it dimmed, and it could no longer maintain its form, reverting into a cluster of shimmering silver flames. The talismans affixed to the Pegasus seized the opportunity, merging into layers of multicolored light that firmly restrained the silver flames. Under Han Li's control, the Gratian fire raven suspended within the purple ice transformed into a mass of scarlet fire. Enclosing the Purisun flame essence, he formed an incantation gesture with both hands and struck the purple ice with several spell seals. Each seal entered with a flash of light. The massive glacier shimmered and rapidly contracted. In the blink of an eye, it condensed into a sphere no larger than a fist. Han Li raised his hand, drawing it into his grasp, and examined it with quiet interest. At that moment, a child's sigh sounded beside his ear, followed by words tinged with envy. "I did not expect your fortune to be so great as to obtain the Great Sun Essence fire. If you can fuse it with the Gratian true flame, the benefits will exceed your expectations. Among the immortal spirit flames of the spirit realm, few can surpass it." Immortal spirit flames. Han Li's expression shifted slightly, but he did not pursue the topic. Instead, he clasped his hands, producing a roll of thunder. Fine arcs of golden lightning shot forth, tightly wrapping around the ice sphere until it was completely secured. In an instant, all traces of the purple ice vanished, replaced entirely by golden lightning. With a flick of his sleeve, he summoned a small azure cauldron. It spun once before descending in front of him. It was the Heaven Void Cauldron. Han Li lightly tapped its surface, producing a clear, resonant tone. The lid flew upward, and strands of azure light surged out, coiling around the lightning-wrapped sphere and pulling it into the cauldron. He then employed his artifact imprint technique to seal it. Only then did he release a long breath. A faint trace of excitement appeared in his eyes. With this flame, he would be able to refine the returning sun water. If it truly extended his lifespan by several hundred years, he would have sufficient time to cultivate the divine essence-fused light, even if the process proved more difficult than anticipated. With this thought, Han Li withdrew his puppet and the five devils, then dismantled the large-scale formation he had set up. Only after erasing all traces of his presence did he depart. Having completed all his objectives in Great Jin, he set out for Heavenly South without hesitation. Upon returning, he would first refine the returning sun water to eliminate concerns regarding both his own lifespan and Nangong Wan's. Next, he would carve out a spatial pocket from the spatial tear within Devil Fall Valley. Finally, he would use the soul-generating ability of the ghost-sifting banner to refine the spatial treasure known as the Crimson Soul Flag. With the Crimson Soul Flag, he would absorb the essence-fused mountain and bring it back to Heavenly South. There he would remain within his spatial pocket, cultivate the divine essence-fused light to completion, and then attempt to break through to the deity transformation stage. To ensure success, he planned to use the peak-grade wood-attributed spirit stone he had preserved from his previous attempt to break, through a bottleneck with the five glacial flames. In addition, there were the devil essence pills mentioned by Xianxia when Han Li rescued Violet Spirit from Devil Cliff Mountain. Before leaving, he had traded with the old devil using Myriad Year Profound Jade, obtaining 3 devil essence pills and slightly increasing his chances of reaching deity transformation. However, the thought of the price he paid caused him some discomfort. He did not know how the old devil had learned of the North Night Palace's myriad-year profound jade, but the man had taken half of it in a single transaction. Whether the pills were a fair exchange or merely a pretext for exploitation remained uncertain. Regardless, no matter how rare the myriad-year profound jade was, Han Li valued the assistance of the devil essence pills more highly. Even a marginal increase in the chance of reaching deity transformation was not something he could afford to ignore. Even in dealing with Xianxia, he had no choice but to accept the terms. Recalling the old devil's smug expression after the trade, Han Li felt somewhat displeased. However, he soon dismissed the matter and turned his attention to his future plans. Several days later, he reached the edge of the red mist and disappeared from the boundary of the fire prison. Not long after, certain individuals in Great Jin who had sensed Han Li's formidable presence also noticed his sudden disappearance. This caused unease among several attentive observers. Only after confirming that Han Li had left Great Jin did they finally relax. Although Han Li's name was not widely known in Great Jin's cultivation world, various unusual rumors about him had circulated among the upper ranks of several major sects. There was said to be a cultivator below the deity transformation stage who could interact with deity transformation. Cultivators as equals effortlessly kill late nascent soul cultivators of the same level and remain unaffected by the erosion of worldly qi. Such accounts caused many reclusive experts to regard him with caution. Now that it was clear Han Li had no intention of establishing a sect in Great Jin, they set aside their concerns and no longer paid him further attention. Nanda, after Han Li's disappearance, time passed quietly. In what seemed like an instant 40 years went by. During this period, Great Jin's cultivation world remained largely peaceful. While occasional disturbances arose, none were significant enough to shake the world. At the same time, within a cave dwelling located countless kilometers away in heavenly south, a burst of delighted laughter echoed. All my effort has finally borne fruit. I have refined the fire. Now I can produce the returning sun water. The laughter gradually faded, leaving only silence within the cave. 1 month later, a figure slipped out of the cave and streaked across the sky as a line of azure light. 3 months later, a young man appeared within Devilfall Valley. He quietly proceeded into its depths before vanishing once more. Several more months passed. Then a small mountain within the valley began to emit vast quantities of dark, ghostly qi. The mist was as black as ink, enveloping an area of 50 kilometers. Yin winds howled through it, carrying countless ghostly wails. Anyone passing through would feel as though they had entered the underworld. This phenomenon persisted for half a year before the yin qi gradually dissipated. 1 month later, the young man reappeared from Devilfall Valley and departed as quietly as he had arrived. Due to his exceptional movement and concealment techniques, no one detected his presence. This person was naturally Han Li, who had just completed the refinement of the Crimson Soul flag and the spatial pocket. Decades earlier, after returning to the Drifting Cloud sect from Great Jin, he had expended considerable effort to refine the returning sun water and consumed it himself. A few months later, he refined several additional bottles. As Nangong Wan remained in seclusion, he sent 1 bottle to her cave residence using a flying sword before departing for Devilfall Valley to refine the Crimson Soul flag. With the abundant souls from the 10 ghost-sifting flags and the guidance of the soaring sky beast, he completed the refinement smoothly, though it required considerable time. The remnants of the Black Wind banner had finally been transformed into the Crimson Soul flag. Now, having returned to the sect, Han Li began comprehending the first 2 layers of the divine essence-fused light. Even with the Crimson Soul flag, he still needed the ability to control the essence-fused mountain before he could incorporate it into the flag. Before entering seclusion, he suddenly recalled something. After a brief hesitation, he brought a bottle of returning sun water to the medicinal garden, then immediately resumed seclusion. The humanoid puppet remained in the cave residence, tasked with using the small mysterious bottle to nurture spirit insects and cultivate several medicinal plants. 10 years later, Han Li emerged from meditation, a trace of puzzlement on his face. As expected, the divine essence-fused light is extremely difficult to cultivate. Without the assistance of the essence-fused mountain, it appears impossible to progress further. Now that I have completed the first layer, I will need to travel to the Star Palace to retrieve it. At that moment, the image of a child appeared before him and spoke. If I were you, I would first prepare a pure metal-attributed demon core to complete the 5-element spirit roots. Although this method is new to me, the technique clearly involves the power of all 5 elements. Without the corresponding spirit roots, your body will be placed under considerable strain. I understand. You have mentioned this before. However, metal-attributed demon beasts are extremely rare, and I require a core from a metamorphosed beast. It will not be easy to obtain. Han Li sighed, flipping his hand to reveal a radiant multicolored light. The child rolled his eyes. Did you not encounter the metal-attributed Flood Dragon King in the Scattered Star Seas? That was a genuine Grade 10 demon beast. Its core should suffice. Han Li frowned slightly and said slowly, "That is true. However, it resides in the outer seas, which are not easy to access. I should first prepare several metal-attributed magic tools before considering such a journey. As I recall, you mentioned that magic tools can also substitute for spirit roots." The boy shook his head. While it is indeed possible to use tools in place of demon cores, the refinement process will be significantly slower, and there is a certain level of risk. With the returning sun, water time is no longer a pressing concern. We can discuss this further after I arrive at the Scattered Star Seas. Han Li nodded, stood up and stretched his limbs before walking out of the secluded chamber. In a flash of silver light, another Han Li appeared before him. Han Li remained unconcerned and exchanged information with the second nascent soul within the puppet. Suddenly his expression changed drastically and he exclaimed, "What? The profound goddess's palm has revived." When Han Li received this information from his puppet, his mind was deeply shaken. Before entering seclusion, he had casually dripped a few drops of returning sun water onto the profound goddess's palm. At the time, it showed no reaction and remained completely lifeless. Now that he was told it had revived, he found it difficult to accept. Without delay, Han Li went straight to the medicine garden. The profound goddess's palm had been planted beside several other rare spiritual medicines, including the 9-curl ginseng. Upon arrival, he carefully observed its current state. Even though he had mentally prepared himself, he was still thoroughly astonished. Originally, after being nourished by the green liquid from the small mysterious bottle, the plant had only turned slightly greener, yet it remained dry and inert. Now, however, its vines had spread across the ground and climbed up multiple white jade pillars. It appeared lush and vigorous, filled with vitality. A faint fragrance drifted from it, surpassing even the other spiritual herbs in the garden. The 9-curl spirit ginseng's white rabbit form was resting peacefully atop one of the vine's roots. As Han Li approached, the rabbit's ears twitched slightly. Its red eyes opened just a fraction, and after confirming it was him, it closed them again and continued sleeping. After hundreds of years under Han Li's care, the 9-curl ginseng's incarnation had come to treat the garden as its own domain. Having never encountered danger under his protection, it no longer held any vigilance toward him. Han Li did not disturb it. Instead, he quietly began examining the vine. Aside from its dense spiritual qi, the revived profound goddess's palm appeared outwardly similar to an ordinary vine. However, closer inspection revealed subtle irregularities. Its surface carried a faint metallic sheen despite its emerald green color. More notably, the veins of its leaves were unusual, each one distinct, yet carrying a sense of familiarity. Han Li silently stared at the leaves, his thoughts gradually forming. The vein patterns resembled the silver runes recorded in the golden jade tome. He frowned slightly and examined over a dozen leaves in succession before discovering something remarkable. The patterns appeared to be composed of incomplete silver rune script, as if each character had only been written halfway. Han Li remained still for a long time, contemplating. Eventually, he reached out and gently touched one of the leaves. Its surface felt smooth and refined like polished jade. He stroked his chin, his expression turning thoughtful. At that moment, he considered summoning the soaring sky beast to inquire about matters related to profound spirit trees. However, after brief consideration, he abandoned the idea. At present, the beast was most likely cultivating within the heaven-void cauldron, completely unaware of the outside world. Ever since returning to his cave residence, Han Li had sealed off the cauldron, cutting off all external contact. As long as he remained in seclusion, he had no intention of releasing the demon beast, ensuring that none of his secrets would be exposed. Thus, the soaring sky beast knew nothing about the small, mysterious bottle. As for the profound goddess's palm itself, Han Li had already researched all known records and legends. According to certain ancient myths, when life first emerged from primordial chaos, the heavens descended alongside spirit trees. These trees bore flowers and fruits that granted abilities beyond comprehension, capable of defying the laws of the world. They were regarded as true heaven-defying treasures. However, these accounts were merely ancient legends. Han Li had never witnessed such things personally. Even so, the repeated mentions in ancient texts suggested that there was some truth to them. These spirit trees were said to have growth cycles spanning 100,000 years, yet their flowers and fruits would only exist for a few days or even mere hours. Within such a short window, the fruits would quickly wither, making successful harvesting almost impossible. Only the flowers and fruits of these profound heavenly trees possessed such law-defying power. The vines and wood themselves were merely materials for refining tools far less valuable by comparison. Although Han Li had not informed the child about the small portion of the profound goddess's palm root in his possession, he had no intention of revealing its revival through the returning sun water either. Even if the plant fell into another's hands, it would hold little value without its flowers or fruits. However, its mere existence would still attract attention and invite unnecessary trouble. With the assistance of the small mysterious bottle, Han Li believed he could accelerate its growth and obtain its flowers and fruits within 200 to 300 years. Such an opportunity was not something he would give up. If the child learned of this, there was a possibility the information could reach its original body in the spirit realm. That would only bring complications. Although the soaring sky beast likely possessed deeper knowledge about the tree, Han Li ultimately chose not to take the risk. After making his decision, he let out a slow breath. He then placed several powerful restrictions around the plant, restoring the medicine garden to its previous state. 3 days later, Han Li left a puppet behind at his cave residence. He summoned Lu Luo and several sect elders, informing them of his departure. Soon after, he appeared above an unnamed mountain within the scattered star seas. In a streak of azure light, he vanished beyond the horizon. Several months later, on a quiet night within a hidden chamber at the peak of Heavenly Star City's Star Palace, a woman dressed in white palace robes sat cross-legged on a mat. Her eyes were closed and her hands formed incantation seals. A soft white light flowed across her body, indicating she was cultivating. As the spiritual light flickered, a trace of pain gradually appeared on her face. The light grew unstable, pulsing irregularly. Just as it seemed on the verge of losing control, the woman abruptly stopped her incantation and halted her cultivation. The white light around her slowly dissipated. She exhaled softly and opened her eyes, glancing around unconsciously. In the next moment, her expression changed. Shock and alarm surfaced in her gaze. In the corner of the room stood a figure with his hands clasped behind his back, watching her with a faint, enigmatic smile. "Brother Han, so it is you." After recognizing him, the woman relaxed slightly and revealed a gentle smile. However, beneath her composed exterior, a subtle trace of fear remained. This chamber was a restricted area within the Star Palace, protected by over 30 layers of formations. Yet he had entered without alerting her in the slightest. "Fellow Taoist Ling, after so many years, your bearing remains unchanged. However, your cultivation method seems somewhat unsuitable," Han Li said calmly, a slight smile on his face. Ling Yuling nodded faintly. "As you've observed, there is indeed an issue with my cultivation. I had been planning to seek guidance from a senior. Since you are here, I would like to ask for your opinion. Han Li chuckled lightly. Guidance would be too strong a word. Still, I can offer some thoughts after hearing your situation. Before that, however, I have come to retrieve the xianxia mountain. Ling Yuling was momentarily stunned. She hesitated before asking, "That mountain was left in our care by you. Naturally, it should be returned. But how do you intend to move it?" "I have a method, though I am not certain it will succeed." "I can only attempt it," Han Li replied evenly. A trace of surprise flashed across her face. "In that case, I will lead the way." "Thank you for your assistance," fellow Taoist Ling Han Li said with a nod. 2 hours later, they arrived within a subterranean passage beneath the mountain, stopping before a massive jade gate. Using the command medallion in her hand, Ling Yuling released the seal. The door slowly opened. Han Li took a breath and stepped inside. After a brief pause, Ling Yuling followed. The familiar scene unfolded once more. As soon as they passed through the gate, dense elemental power surged toward them, violently agitating the spiritual energy within their bodies. However, Han Li was now at the peak of the late nascent soul stage. His magical power was far more refined and abundant than before. He had no intention of allowing it to be drawn away. He immediately circulated his cultivation technique, suppressing the disturbance within his body. Then, forming a hand seal, he focused his attention on the center of his chest. A crackling sound followed. An egg-sized sphere of light appeared, radiating 5-colored brilliance that flowed continuously across its surface. At once, the surrounding elemental energy around Han Li dimmed significantly. Standing behind him, Ling Yuling sensed the shift and smiled. "Congratulations, Brother Han. You have successfully cultivated the first layer of the divine essence fuse light." Han Li gave a faint chuckle. "Without refining it to this level, I would not have been able to attempt moving the mountain." Ling Yuling hesitated briefly before speaking again. "Although you have only reached the first layer, you may indeed be able to move it. However, removing it entirely will not be easy. If your method fails, would you consider joining the Star Palace? I can guarantee that no one will interfere with your cultivation, and you will have priority access to our resources." Han Li glanced at her and replied indifferently, "There is no need to mention this again. If I had intended to join the Star Palace, I would have done so long ago. As for whether my method will work, I will determine that through this attempt." Han Li tossed the ball of spiritual light in his hand, allowing it to hover steadily in mid-air. With his other hand, he reached toward his waist and summoned a small flag only a few inches long. The flag was entirely crimson, and as it appeared, it released pulses of scarlet light accompanied by faint, ghostly wails. Ling Yuling glanced at the object, her expression shifting slightly as she cast Han Li a curious look. However, Han Li showed no intention of explaining. He merely muttered something under his breath and flicked the flag upward. A flash of light followed. The small flag rapidly expanded, growing to a height of 3 meters in an instant. Its surface shimmered with a deep crimson hue, resembling freshly spilled blood. At Han Li's command, the massive flag unfurled. A dense mist surged forth from it, quickly forming a crimson cloud that swept toward the summit of essence-fused mountain. The cloud churned as it came to a halt above its destination, then gradually spread outward. It covered most of the mountain's peak, filling the air with a heavy stench, as if blood itself had seeped into the atmosphere. Ling Yuling extended her spiritual sense into the cloud. Immediately, she sensed an immense number of yin souls within. Startled, she hastily withdrew her perception, a lingering unease taking hold in her mind. At that moment, Han Li strode forward toward essence-fused mountain and waved his hand through the air. A sphere of light flashed and shot toward the small mountain, disappearing without a trace. He waved his hand again, this time reaching out as if grasping something invisible. The mountain suddenly flickered with rainbow light and trembled several times. A deep rumble echoed as it slowly rose from the ground, lifting into the air before drifting toward the crimson cloud. Ling Yuling watched in astonishment as the mountain entered the cloud and vanished entirely. Han Li then formed a spell seal with his hand. The crimson cloud churned once more, then gradually shrank. returning to its original form as a small crimson banner only a few inches long. It descended back into Han Li's hand. The mountain below was now completely empty, as if essence-fused mountain had never existed. A spatial treasure. Ling Yuling finally regained her composure, though shock remained evident on her face. This treasure does possess some spatial abilities. It seems I've given you quite a spectacle, Han Li said with a faint smile, having already swept his spiritual sense through the Crimson Soul banner. Ling Yuling inhaled sharply. It has spatial abilities and can even store essence-fused mountain. I fear there are only a few such treasures in the mortal world. Fellow Taoist Han is truly fortunate to have obtained one. Back when the Star Palace sages devised a method to control Han Li, they believed that cultivating the divine essence-fused light would bind him to the Star Palace. Now, however, Han Li had rendered that arrangement meaningless. Ling Yuling sighed inwardly and finally abandoned the idea of recruiting him into the Star Palace. A flash of crimson light flickered in Han Li's hand as the small flag disappeared. After a brief moment of thought, he smiled at her. I can remain at the palace for a short time. We can exchange some cultivation insights, and I can examine the issues affecting your cultivation. However, during this period, there is something I need your assistance with. Ling Yuling was momentarily taken aback, but she quickly composed herself and smiled. Brother Han has already shown great kindness to our palace. It is only natural for us to assist you. There is no need for such formality. It is a minor matter. I wish to know the recent whereabouts of the golden worm in the outer seas. The more precise the information, the better, Han Li said calmly, as if discussing something trivial. Ling Yuling was visibly surprised. Her eyes widened slightly. After a brief hesitation, she spoke in a low voice. Brother Han wishes to locate that old demon. Could it be that you... Han Li glanced at her and raised an eyebrow. I have my reasons for seeking the Golden Worm King. There is no need to speculate. This matter will not involve your palace. Or do you find it too difficult? Ling Yuling shook her head and replied seriously, Brother Han has treated our palace with great kindness. Even if the request were more difficult, I would not refuse. However, in recent years, the palace has withdrawn all of its forces from the outer seas. Furthermore, the Golden Worm is a 10th grade demon cultivator. Locating its whereabouts may take more than a few days. Time is not an issue. I can wait several years if necessary, Han Li said casually. Ling Yuling set aside her hesitation. In that case, we will make arrangements immediately. Fellow Taoist may remain as long as you wish. Han Li nodded, satisfied with her response. The two spoke for a while longer before leaving the cave. 2 years later, a man and a woman hovered above an unnamed island in the outer star seas. The man had an ordinary appearance, but his eyes were bright and sharp. The woman appeared delicate and refined. Though both looked young, the woman treated the man with great respect. The man himself remained indifferent. From what you said, the Golden Worm King should appear at this island. Could it have changed its plans? The man asked in a calm voice. The woman immediately responded respectfully. Elder Han, please rest assured. I have verified this information multiple times. It was obtained through a soul search of a high-grade demon cultivator. Beneath this island grows an extremely rare spirit fruit. While it is of little use to humans, it is highly favored by the Worm clan. Every 10 years when the fruit ripens, the Golden Worm King comes here and consumes it beneath the island, regardless of any obstruction. If the fruit had disappeared or changed location, the Worm clan would have relocated long ago. It should now be the ripening period. Under normal circumstances, the Golden Worm King will definitely appear. Then I will wait a few more days, the man replied in a low voice. Naturally, the man was Han Li, and the woman was a disciple sent by Ling Yuling to guide him. Over the past 2 years, with the full efforts of the Star Palace, they had finally located the Golden Worm King. Han Li had remained at the palace during this time until he was quietly led through a hidden teleportation formation to the outer seas. He had been waiting on this island for several months. Until now, there had been no sign of the Golden Worm King, prompting Han Li to question the woman again out of impatience. After hearing her confident explanation, his expression eased. Just as Han Li was about to ask further questions, his expression suddenly shifted. He turned to look toward the distant sea. Good. It has finally arrived. From its aura, there is no doubt it is the Golden Worm King, Han Li said, a faint trace of satisfaction appearing on his face. He then turned to the woman and instructed, "You should leave now and remove yourself from danger." Upon hearing this, the woman's heart trembled. She quickly performed a respectful bow before departing as a streak of white light. After confirming her departure, Han Li flicked his sleeve and a small black bottle appeared. A gust of white demonic wind swept through the area, followed by the gradual emergence of 5 skeletons. Go. With Han Li's silent command, the 5 skeletons immediately dispersed, riding demonic winds and disappearing in different directions. Soon after, a spirit beast pouch flew out. A dozen 4-winged centipedes emerged buzzing as they spread out. Han Li ordered them to burrow into the sea beneath the island. He cast another glance at the distant sea and gave a faint sneer before his figure abruptly vanished. All of these preparations were completed in an instant. In the blink of an eye, the island became completely empty, as if no one had ever been there. After the time it would take to finish a meal, light flashed on the horizon. A golden streak and an azure streak cut through the air, rapidly approaching across the ocean. Their light faded, revealing 2 figures. One was tall and sturdy, wearing a golden robe embroidered with patterns with a green beard. The other was slender, dressed in azure robes with a silver hat. As soon as they arrived, the large man in golden robes showed a trace of hesitation on his dignified face. He quickly scanned the surroundings, but found nothing unusual. Seeing this, the azure-robed cultivator showed a curious expression. "What is it?" Did fellow Taoist Jin notice something unusual? The golden-robed man frowned slightly and replied, "From a distance, it seemed that someone's spiritual sense swept past us. However, it felt somewhat weak. It may have been an illusion." The azure-robed cultivator laughed lightly. "If that were true, would that not mean their spiritual sense surpasses yours, Brother Jin? How could that be possible? Brother Feng overestimates me. Though I am known as the Golden Worm King in these nearby seas beyond them, I am nothing remarkable," the golden-robed man said, shaking his head. He then extended his spiritual sense across the island once more and relaxed upon finding nothing. Naturally, he had no way of knowing that the 5 devils had already dispersed to the far reaches of the sky, and the 6-winged frost centipedes were hidden deep beneath the sea. As for Han Li, his spiritual sense far surpassed that of the worm, making detection impossible. The azure-robed cultivator seemed somewhat dismissive of the golden-robed man's caution, but he still smiled and said, "Brother Jin is truly modest. Aside from deity transformation cultivators, what could threaten you? Still, this place is quite remote. If you had not brought me here, I would never have known that the dragon-scale fruit grows in such a location. I discovered that tree by chance in the past. Since then, I have come here once every 10 years to harvest its fruit. According to human records, the fruit is described as extraordinary. After consuming it, one could supposedly soar through the skies. For high-grade cultivators, it may hold little value, but for those of our worm clan, it is quite delicious. However, no one expected that the spirit fruit exceeds what is recorded by humans. With repeated consumption, it can strengthen the body and grant immense physical power. Of course, this effect requires consistent intake over time. As there are very few of these fruits in existence, human cultivators were unable to uncover this property. Still, I am somewhat surprised that fellow Taoist Feng is aware of so many secrets, including the method to relocate the fruit tree." The large man in golden robes looked at the azure-robed cultivator with a peculiar expression. The azure-robed cultivator replied calmly, "I merely came across the remains of an ancient demon. The secrets regarding the fruit and the method of transplanting it were recorded there. It was also stated that consuming a single fruit would only produce subtle changes in the body, so minor that one would not notice them. However, if one were to consume a fruit daily over a long period, The body could eventually become as powerful as that of a true dragon. Of course, there is no confirmation that this is accurate. In theory, it may be possible, but in reality, it cannot be achieved. Even if we were to gather all dragon-scale fruit trees, no individual could consume such a vast quantity of fruit. Even a single tree is extremely precious to our worm clan. In truth, if not for your absolute confidence in the transplant method, I would not have brought you here, the large man said solemnly. Hehe, I hold great respect for many in your clan, fellow Taoist. I would not dare deceive you. However, regarding what you promised me, Feng Shi said with a faint smile, this azure-robed demon cultivator was none other than Feng Shi, the grade 9 windbreaker beast who had once pursued Han Li and from whom Han Li had obtained the thunderstorm wings. The large man was the Golden Worm King. At present, he no longer appeared in his half-dragon form as he had on Green Spirit Island, but instead looked like an ordinary cultivator. The Worm King waved his hand. As long as your information proves correct, I will not go back on my word. I will give you several of the fruits. Feng Shi's face lit up with restrained joy. He cupped his hands in salute. These fruits are of great use to me. I thank you in advance. That is enough. We should first confirm whether your method works, the large man said calmly. Rest assured, if I were not certain, I would not have come to you. This transplant method was something the ancient demon spent his entire life researching. It is not only effective for the dragon-scale fruit tree, but also applicable to other spirit plants. Feng Shi replied with confidence. The large man gave a short chuckle. I hope so. Feng Shi smiled faintly and said nothing more. His body flickered with azure light as he descended. Wait. Feng Shi halted immediately. With a slightly darkened expression, the large man said, something still feels off. I sense a faint unease. I will use a secret technique to examine the surroundings again and ensure nothing is amiss. Feng Shi felt some displeasure but remained silent. He could only comply. The large man then spat out a shimmering golden pearl. Holding it in his hand, he pressed it against his forehead and closed his eyes. Soon after, light flowed from the pearl as its glow intensified. A trace of strain appeared on his face. This pearl was a rare auxiliary treasure that could significantly enhance a cultivator's spiritual sense. When the Worm King released his spiritual sense, its power increased by nearly half, and its range expanded accordingly. After a short while, his expression changed abruptly. His gaze sharpened as he looked around. He withdrew the pearl and shouted loudly, Who dares to approach in secret? Show yourself. His voice thundered through the air. Feng Shi was startled. He quickly released his own spiritual sense, confusion evident in his expression. The Worm King continued staring in one direction with a cold expression. I did not expect you to possess such a treasure. It seems I miscalculated. A voice came from the direction he was watching. Immediately after, a streak of azure light shot forward, arriving 100 meters away in an instant. Han Li stood there calmly looking at the two of them. It's you. That human named Li. The Golden Worm King and Feng Shi both exclaimed at once. However, their reactions differed. Feng Shi showed clear excitement, while the Worm King remained cautious. The large man narrowed his eyes. Fellow Taoist Feng, do you know this person? Feng Shi quickly replied, Brother Jin, this is the human cultivator who killed your descendant and took away a treasure I refined. I did not expect to encounter him again in the outer seas after so many years. This time we must not allow him to escape. His cultivation. As he spoke, Feng Shi swept his spiritual sense across Han Li. His expression immediately changed to one of shock. A faint golden light flashed in the Worm King's eyes. He said coldly, escape. Haven't you noticed? He came to us on his own. Impossible. When I last saw him, he was only at the core formation stage. How could he now possess the power of a grand cultivator? Feng Shi's mind fell into confusion. Fellow Taoist Feng has spent several hundred years in seclusion. It seems you are unaware of what occurred on Green Spirit Island. There is no doubt he is now a grand cultivator. His arrival is not a good sign. We must deal with him carefully, the Golden Worm King transmitted. Fengxi licked his lips and nodded without hesitation. As both demons looked at Han Li with hostility, Han Li spoke calmly. I originally came here only to find fellow Taoist Jin. I did not expect to encounter another acquaintance. It seems this trip was worthwhile. He stood with his hands behind his back, a faint cold smile on his face, as he glanced at Feng Shi. The large man smiled grimly. You came to find me. Could it be that peak-grade spirit stone is too much for you to handle, and you intend to return it? It is still useful to me, so I cannot give it to you. This time I came for your demon core. If you hand it over, we can avoid unnecessary conflict, Han Li said calmly. His words stunned both demons. The Golden Worm King's expression darkened. He let out a loud laugh filled with anger. You want my core? You dare say such things before me? Good. Very good. If you want it, come and take it. A brilliant golden light erupted from his robes, instantly forming a layer of radiant golden armor. At the same time, a dazzling light flashed from his body. Scales appeared along his cheek, and a dragon tail extended from his back. In an instant, he entered a half-demon combat state. With a flick of his hand, a golden halberd appeared its surface, crackling with silver lightning. Thunder rolled from it as it blurred and vanished, reappearing directly before Han Li. Wrapped in lightning, it struck down fiercely. The Worm King attacked without hesitation. Han Li's heart stirred slightly, but he had already prepared himself. Without delay, he waved his sleeve. A flash of silver light appeared before him, forming a lotus about 1 meter in size. The golden halberd struck the center of the lotus. A loud explosion followed. The silver lotus trembled violently, releasing 7-colored Buddhist light from its core. The halberd was blocked. Although the light dimmed, the lotus remained intact. Han Li immediately formed a hand seal. Thunder sounded from his back as a pair of azure and white wings appeared. With a light flap, he moved over 30 meters away. A faint sneer appeared on his face. The thunderstorm wings, Fengxi shouted in anger upon seeing them. His body trembled as red light gathered in his hands, forming a pair of short axes. With a swing, he sent them forward as 2 crimson streaks. Han Li glanced at him coldly and snorted. He opened his mouth, releasing a cloud of azure mist. Within it was a small cauldron, only a few inches in size, the Heaven Void Cauldron. He silently activated the artifact imprint technique. A clear ringing sound came from the cauldron as its lid flew open. The 2 crimson streaks reached above Han Li, spinning as they descended, about to cleave down with lethal force. Han Li simply extended his finger and flicked the cauldron. With a dull sound, countless azure threads surged outward, filling the air and wrapping tightly around the 2 streaks. Fengxi's expression changed drastically. He quickly attempted to recall his treasures. However, despite his efforts, the axes were forcibly dragged into the small cauldron and disappeared. His connection to them was instantly severed. Fengxi stood there completely stunned. When Fengxi witnessed this, a chill ran down his spine. Those 2 axes had been obtained after he killed a nascent soul cultivator. They possessed many unusual abilities, yet they had been effortlessly seized and suppressed by that seemingly unremarkable small cauldron. At that moment, he finally realized that Han Li was no longer the core formation cultivator who had once fled in panic. After his initial strike failed, the Golden Worm King did not press the attack. Instead, he waved a hand to recall the golden halberd and said, "Fellow Taoist Feng, remain cautious. That small cauldron is the Heaven Void Cauldron from human legend. It would be best if we attack together." The Heaven Void Cauldron. Very well, we will proceed as you suggest. As long as we kill this man, the cauldron will be yours. I only want the thunderstorm wings that were taken from me. Agreed. The Worm King let out a loud laugh. Golden armor shimmered across his body, and dazzling light radiated outward as he rose into the air like a blazing sun. The brilliance was almost blinding. It was clear that the demon was circulating his magic power to its utmost limit. Then something unexpected occurred. The Golden Worm King released a long shriek. Light flickered beneath his ribs, and another pair of golden-scaled arms emerged. The new arms grasped at the air as light flashed. One hand held a white sword about a meter long, while the other gripped a small glistening shield. The shield was covered in coin-sized scales, as if it had been refined from the Worm King's own body. The demon then raised his remaining hand toward the sky and formed an incantation gesture, as if activating a secret technique. When Han Li saw this, his eyes narrowed and his expression turned serious. The term Sacred Provenance Plate surfaced in his mind along with its connection to the Elder Devils. At the same time, Feng Shi tore open his robes, revealing his bare upper body. He bent forward slightly as two protrusions appeared on his back, followed by the unfolding of his wings. Each wing extended 3 meters in length and shone with a bright green hue. Simultaneously, Feng Xi's face turned dark gray, and his hands transformed into sharp claws with a cold metallic sheen. Both demons had entered a half-transformed state. Han Li watched this with a faint curve of his lips, before settling into a slight smile. "It seems the two of you are finally taking me seriously. That is fine, but do not blame me for having assistance as well." Before the Worm King and Feng Shi could fully understand his meaning, mournful wails and shrieks echoed from the horizon, as if something was approaching from all directions. At the same time, white light flashed beneath the island, and more than a dozen white streaks shot upward from the ground. "Attack! Kill him before his reinforcements arrive." A fierce expression appeared on the Golden Worm King's face as he shouted. Immediately afterward, he ceased his incantation. Gesture opened his mouth and released a dense beam of golden light as he charged forward. His speed was so great that an afterimage lingered behind him while the golden beam continued to pour from his mouth. Feng Xi did not dare to hesitate. He spread his wings, summoned a gale around himself, and blurred into motion as he rushed forward. Han Li merely raised an eyebrow but did not move. He lifted a hand revealing a green wooden ruler and slowly rotated it in his palm. A large silver lotus instantly bloomed before him, enveloping his entire body. At the same time, he flipped his other hand, and a sphere of tricolored light appeared, transforming into a feathered fan. Han Li grasped the fan and waved it toward the incoming golden beam. A pillar of tricolored flames surged forth, colliding directly with the golden light in front of the silver lotus. A powerful shockwave erupted from the collision. Although the golden beam was condensed from the Worm King's demonic power, it was halted by the flames and even appeared to be gradually consumed by them. The Golden Worm King's heart trembled at the sight, but he did not stop. He waved one of his arms. Golden light flickered as the worm scale shield appeared before him, transforming into a dense barrier of light that protected his body. At the same time, he wielded his other weapons. White sword light and golden spear light filled the air, forming a continuous stream of attacks that poured down upon the tricolored flames like a storm. Both the golden spear and the white sword were exceptionally sharp, and neither was affected by the intense heat of the flames. The interweaving gold and white light formed a rigid net, blocking the radiance spreading from the flames. Han Li was slightly surprised, but he had no time to focus on this. Feng Xi had already used an unknown movement technique to circle around him. From over 100 meters away, he had moved to Han Li's flank. His wings spread wide and his claws were prepared. The sound of tearing wind echoed loudly. Countless feathers shot out from his wings like arrows, and every swing of his claws produced numerous streaks of claw light. All of them struck toward the silver lotus surrounding Han Li. Han Li glanced at Feng Xi's fierce assault with calm indifference. He then opened his mouth and released 3 streaks of golden light. A series of heavy ringing sounds followed as the feathers and claw streaks struck the lotus. However, the attacks seemed to vanish upon contact, leaving the lotus completely unharmed as it continued to rotate steadily. When Feng Xi saw that his attacks had no effect, a look of shock appeared on his face. At that moment, 3-inch-long golden swords suddenly appeared in front of him, twisting through space in an unusual manner. Startled, Feng Xi instinctively flapped his wings and his body blurred. Sword chi flashed and the small swords pierced through his form, but what they struck was only an after-image. In the next instant, Feng Xi reappeared more than 70 meters away. His face had turned pale as if the maneuver had consumed a significant amount of magic power. Han Li frowned slightly. He had not expected Feng Shi to possess such mastery over wind-based evasion techniques. If he wished to kill him, it would require additional effort. With that thought, he commanded the small swords to expand to a foot in length, then turn and pursue Feng Shi closely. Feng Xi's expression grew cold. Suddenly, a pair of large azure claws appeared in mid-air, striking toward the flying swords at lightning speed. In an instant, all of the swords were captured. A cruel expression appeared on Feng Shi's face as he activated a secret technique, exerting his full strength in an attempt to crush them. However, when azure light enveloped the claws, he discovered that the swords remained completely undamaged. His heart sank. Before he could react further, several buzzing sounds rang out. The golden flying swords took advantage of his brief distraction, breaking free from the claws. They circled around the claws and easily cut them apart. The severed claws scattered into the wind. The flying swords then shifted direction and continued their pursuit of Feng Shi at high speed. This time Feng Shi was even more alarmed. He quickly opened his mouth and released an azure jade bowl. The bowl flipped through the air, releasing a barrier of azure light that attempted to sweep away the flying swords. As the two sides clashed, several crisp, cracking sounds rang out. Under the brilliance of the golden swords, the azure barrier was easily pierced. Feng Xi's expression changed drastically. He no longer dared to confront the swords directly and instead flapped his wings, retreating in a streak of azure light. The flying swords adjusted their direction and continued to pursue him, silently matching his speed. At this point, Feng Xi began to curse inwardly. While maneuvering through the sky, he glanced toward the Golden Worm King. His heart sank even further. The Golden Worm King had already suppressed the tri-colored flames and closed in on Han Li. He attacked the Silver Lotus relentlessly, each strike causing slight ripples across its surface. Within the lotus, Han Li simply waved the Emerald Ruler a few times, and the damage was instantly restored by flashes of seven-colored Buddhist light. The Golden Worm King was unable to break through. Feng Shi's gaze flickered as he considered fleeing. Han Li's strength far exceeded his expectations, and those flying swords alone were enough to threaten his life. However, he suddenly came to a halt, revealing his half-demon form. At some point, more than a dozen snow-white centipedes, each over a meter long, had surrounded him. They possessed 4 wings and bodies that shone like crystal. The 6-winged frost centipedes. Feng Xi exclaimed in alarm, his expression turning grim. The Golden Worm King also stopped his assault. He transformed into a streak of golden light, attempting to escape. Han Li's calm voice sounded from within the lotus. "It is already too late to think of fleeing." As soon as the words fell, 10 red threads shot out from the lotus at incredible speed. They flickered and wrapped tightly around the demon. Light flashed as they transformed into thick ropes of flame, coiling around him and engulfing him completely. At the same time, a grey demonic wind swept through the sky, carrying 5 ghostly heads the size of wheels. They appeared ferocious and wailed continuously as they plunged into the sea of flames without hesitation. Within the flames, the Golden Worm King let out a cry of terror, his voice filled with deep fear. As Feng Shi swept his gaze across the scene, a chill settled deep within his heart. Whether it was another attack from Han Li or the dozen 6-winged frost centipedes surrounding him, he had no means to deal with any of them. After making his decision, Feng Shi formed an incantation gesture. A crimson glow surged from his upper body, and blood burst violently from his flesh, enveloping him within a dense cloud of blood. At the same time, his wings absorbed the blood in an instant, turning a deep scarlet. He drew in a deep breath and flapped his wings, intending to escape using a secret technique. However, at that very moment, a clear and steady scripture resounded, and an immense restraining force pressed down upon him. His body stiffened. The magic power within him froze completely, leaving him unable to move. Only then did Feng Shi notice in his alarm a silver lotus beneath him, about a foot in size. It was slowly blooming, confining him within 7-colored Buddhist light. Panic rose within him, and he immediately began casting techniques in an attempt to break free. However, the dozen centipedes seized this opportunity and expelled glacial qi toward him. The icy white qi enveloped him entirely, sealing the blood cloud within. Feng Xi's cries of agony echoed from inside. At some distance away, Han Li calmly turned the eight-spirit ruler in his hand, not even glancing in Feng Xi's direction. Everything remained under his control. At that moment, the Golden Worm King's aura suddenly came to a halt. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly as he looked upward. A thunderous explosion erupted within the sea of flames. The flames scattered instantly as a powerful gust surged outward, followed by something shooting away at tremendous speed. Han Li's expression darkened. Thunder rumbled behind him and he vanished. In the next instant, the fleeing object came to an abrupt stop. Above it, azure and white lightning flashed as Han Li appeared. He looked down and saw only the skeleton of a miniature worm. It was about a foot long, gleaming with golden light, as if forged from pure gold. The flood dragon held a thumb-sized golden core in its mouth. From behind, wails rang out. 5 ghostly heads burst forth from the sea of flames, their expressions pained and their forms dim, as if they had been injured. The golden bone worm stirred upon seeing the cinque devils and immediately fled as a streak of golden light, vanishing in an instant. Han Li gave a cold snort. Black light flickered at his brow as a third eye appeared, releasing a streak of black light that vanished as quickly as it emerged. A muffled explosion followed. Golden and black light intertwined, and the bone worm tumbled out, spinning several times in the air. Realizing the situation was unfavorable, the bone worm attempted to steady itself and continue fleeing. However, it was already too late. Azure light flashed nearby, forming a net out of thin air that ensnared the bone worm, rendering it immobile. At the same time, a 3-meter-long streak of golden light descended from above. With a flash, the bone worm was split cleanly in two. A strand of green flame shot out from within the shattered body, attempting to escape. However, Han Li had already anticipated this. He extended a hand, forming a large azure hand that seized the green flame. He then moved forward and retrieved a small green bottle with a flick of his sleeve. Tilting the bottle, it released a stream of black mist. The azure hand loosened slightly, allowing the mist to sweep over the green flame and draw it into the bottle. Afterward, Han Li lifted the bottle and sent his spiritual sense into it. A faint expression of satisfaction appeared on his face. The soul of a 10th-grade demon beast was an exceedingly rare material. Once he put the bottle away, he glanced at the golden core and the remains of the bone worm, collecting them without hesitation. The golden core was clearly his primary objective, a metal attribute worm core. As for the golden skeleton, it also held some value to him. Earlier within the Sea of Flames, he had seen that although the Worm King had been unable to escape the restraints of his flame threads and the attacks of the cinque devils, it had used an unknown technique to detonate its flesh break free and control its miniature skeleton with its soul. In this way, the Worm King had effectively created a second body. By abandoning its flesh and escaping with its bones, it could catch opponents off guard. As a 10th-grade demon cultivator with a formidable reputation, it would have been unusual for it to be defeated easily. With 2 spirit treasures and the cinque devils at his disposal, Han Li's strength far exceeded that of ordinary late nascent soul cultivators. Although the Worm King was stronger than most demon beasts, it could not break through the defensive capabilities of the 8-spirit ruler in a short time. Combined with the restraint of the fire spirit threads and the suppression from the flesh-devouring cinque devils, Han Li was able to subdue it without resorting to additional methods. Han Li examined the golden skeleton for a moment, hesitated slightly, then placed it into his storage pouch. Meanwhile, Feng Xi remained trapped within the white glacial mist as expected. The frost qi from the dozen centipedes had already sealed him within ice. Han Li glanced at this former adversary and shook his head slightly. With a thought, his flying sword swept across the ice. The ice shattered into fragments. A green demon soul rushed out, attempting to escape in panic. But it collided directly with a centipede and was instantly devoured, leaving no trace. With both demons eliminated, Han Li began inspecting the storage pouches they had left behind. He soon found something of interest. From Feng Shi's storage pouch, he obtained an ancient jade slip containing several demon cultivator techniques, along with information regarding the dragon scale fruit. It also detailed methods for uprooting and transplanting various spirit trees. This would prove quite useful. From the Worm King's storage pouch, he discovered a technique known as the tempered bone arts. This method allowed both humans and demons to cultivate their skeletons into something akin to a magic treasure, while also strengthening the flesh to an unusual degree. However, the technique required a long period of cultivation. Given his current priorities, Han Li had no intention of practicing it, but he still stored it away. After recalling the Cinque Devils and the centipedes, Han Li transformed into an azure streak and flew into the nearby sea. The dragon scale fruit possessed remarkable effects, and he had no intention of abandoning it. After removing several restrictions within an underwater cave, he eventually located the tree. Fortunately, Feng Xi had already prepared all the necessary materials for transplanting the spirit tree. Han Li made full use of them, shrinking the tree and storing it temporarily in his pouch. In the time it took to finish a meal, an azure streak crossed the sea and vanished beyond the horizon. By the time Han Li returned to the inner star seas and then to the heavenly south, nearly another year had passed. Upon returning to the Dream Cloud Mountains, travel-worn, he met with Nangong Wan, his disciples, and several sect elders for a confidential discussion. After most of a day had passed, the meeting concluded. All those present departed with solemn expressions, as if the matter discussed was of great significance. Soon afterward, disciples of the Drifting Cloud sect noticed that the sect had begun acquiring large quantities of rare spirit, medicines at any cost. At the same time, high-ranking cultivators frequently gathered for discussions. Not long after a piece of information spread throughout the heavenly south, Han Li, Grand Elder of the Drifting Cloud sect, had obtained a secret technique during his recent journey, one that could assist in breaking through to the deity. Transformation stage. However, the technique required a special environment to cultivate. As a result, Han Li intended to leave the sect and enter secluded cultivation for several hundred years. Unless the sect faced a life-or-death crisis, or unless he failed in his cultivation, he would not emerge. Once this news spread, the major sects reacted in different ways. Some were pleased, some relieved, others concerned or wary that significant changes might once again occur in the heavenly south. A year later, Han Li disappeared. His Dao companion, Nangong Wan Mu Peiling, and his other personal disciples also vanished. Only Liu Yu remained within the sect. The Drifting Cloud sect ceased its expansion and instead focused on consolidating its strength. Although other sects coveted its resources, Han Li's formidable reputation deterred them from acting. Years passed, 1 year, 10 years, 100 years. The greatest cultivator of the heavenly south had vanished without a trace. Over time, within the Drifting Cloud sect, the Dream Cloud Mountains, and across the heavenly south, Han Li's name was mentioned less and less. Eventually, he became a legend. His position as Grand Elder remained vacant for over 1,000 years before a successor was finally chosen. Yet after nearly a millennium, the Drifting Cloud sect entered another golden age. Nascent soul cultivators emerged in large numbers, elevating the sect into a dominant power within the heavenly south. Its prosperity endured for thousands of years. After the battle with the Elder Devil in Devil Fall Valley, the restrictions surrounding the valley gradually weakened. As the years passed, the valley eventually became accessible to any cultivator who wished to enter. However, after numerous cultivators had thoroughly searched the outer regions for treasures, spiritual medicines, ores, and other rare materials, these resources were nearly exhausted. Only the most hidden and undiscovered areas might still contain anything of value, and even then, it would depend on one's fortune. As a result, the number of cultivators seeking opportunities in the valley steadily declined, and in time, the outer valley became little different from an ordinary spiritual land. In contrast, the depths of Devil Fall Valley retained their ominous reputation. The restrictions in the deeper regions had not weakened despite the passage of many years. Spatial tiers remained just as numerous as before. In addition, within the past few hundred years, a strange white mist had mysteriously filled the area. Although the mist did not directly harm cultivators, anyone who entered it would immediately feel disoriented, and their spiritual sense would be severely suppressed. If they attempted to go further, they would quickly lose all sense of direction. This unusual phenomenon once caused considerable unrest in the heavenly south. Many cultivators believed that a rare treasure had descended into the valley and that the mist was a heavenly omen. However, no matter how valuable a treasure might be, it could not outweigh one's life. Many high-level cultivators hesitated and did not dare to enter the depths. Soon after, several rogue nascent soul cultivators driven by greed joined forces and ventured into the valley. They were trapped within the mist for several years. The treasures they relied upon to guide themselves proved completely ineffective. In the end, after wandering aimlessly, they barely managed to escape with great difficulty. Later, other confident cultivators also entered the depths, but their outcomes were even worse. Some encountered spatial tiers, while others became trapped for even longer periods. The longest recorded case involved a cultivator wandering within the mist for over 50 years. If not for the abundant spiritual chi in the valley, that person would not have survived until escaping. These reports greatly alarmed the nascent soul cultivators, and from that point on, none dared to rashly enter the valley. As a result, the depths of Devil Fall Valley once again became a forbidden region in the heavenly south, rarely visited by anyone. Over time, cultivators in the heavenly south grew accustomed to the presence of the mist. Those who entered the valley regarded it as a natural phenomenon and no longer investigated its origin. Yet none could have known that within a concealed corner of the valley there existed a small cave residence carved from jade. Beside it lay a medicine garden spanning over 300 meters. It was filled with countless rare spirit medicines that would cause any cultivator to feel deep envy. These plants ranged from several hundred to over 1,000 years in age, emitting a dense and alluring medicinal fragrance. Around the small valley, layers of restrictions had been established, sufficient to trap even a nascent soul cultivator with no means of escape. At the center of the garden stood a stone structure. Inside there was nothing but a woven mat. A cultivator sat cross-legged upon it, motionless like a statue. After an unknown period of time, the figure finally moved. He rose to his feet and slowly stepped out of the building. Under the sunlight, his face became visible. It was Han Li, yet his expression was completely blank and rigid. Han Li walked to a corner of the medicine garden and reached down, digging a small green bottle out of the soil. He then moved to another corner and stopped in front of several particularly lush green vines, pouring a drop of green liquid onto their roots. The vines absorbed the liquid almost instantly. Han Li then returned the bottle to its original place and walked back toward the stone building to continue his meditation. However, he suddenly paused and raised his hand. A white formation plate flew toward him. He caught it and lowered his gaze. Large amounts of azure text floated from its surface. After reading it, Han Li rose into the air and flew toward another hidden location within the valley. Soon he arrived before a small teleportation formation about 3 meters wide. He sat down and remained silent. A moment later, the formation began to glow with flickering light, and an azure figure emerged from within. The figure stepped forward, revealing another Han Li. This newly arrived Han Li appeared identical to the one waiting. He smiled and said, "You have worked hard over these past years. If not for you delivering spirit medicines to the teleportation formation every day, I would not have been able to cultivate to the peak of the early deity transformation stage so quickly. I am you and you are me." "There is no difference," the first Han Li replied calmly. He was the second nascent soul controlling the humanoid puppet. The one who had just arrived was the original Han Li who had emerged from seclusion within the spatial pocket. At this point, it had been 300 years since Han Li left the drifting cloud sect. Back then, he had brought Nangong Wan and his disciples to an ancient teleportation formation. They traveled to the scattered star seas and settled on a remote island with adequate spirit veins. After ensuring their safety, Han Lai returned alone to Devil Fall Valley in the heavenly south and entered the spatial pocket to cultivate the divine, essence-fused light. Before doing so, he released his hidden fortune mansion, placing his spirit beasts and insects inside and arranging his medicine garden there. The profound goddess's palm and the dragon-scale fruit were also stored within it. He then left the humanoid puppet behind, entrusting it with the small, mysterious bottle and full responsibility over the garden. Even so, he remained cautious, fearing that other cultivators might detect traces of his presence in the valley. After a year of effort, he established a vast, ancient formation that produced a bewitching mist, capable of distorting perception and senses, covering most of the valley's depths. Only after completing this arrangement did he issue instructions to his second nascent soul and teleport into the AI spatial pocket. Before beginning his cultivation, Hanli followed the suggestion of the soaring sky beast incarnation and refined the Golden Worm King's demon core. Using a special method, he transformed it into a metal-attributed core spirit root, allowing him to cultivate the divine essence-fused light more efficiently. Neither Han Li nor the boy had anticipated that this unintended action would resolve the fundamental flaw of the technique. It could only be considered an extraordinary stroke of fortune. Otherwise, it would have taken Han Li more than 100 years to realize the problem. By then, even if he restarted cultivation, the damage would have been severe. Even with this advantage and the assistance of the essence-fused mountain, his cultivation did not proceed smoothly. The initial layers progressed without issue, aided by the mountain. However, in the later stages, he frequently encountered bottlenecks and nearly suffered chi deviation, which would have severely harmed his vitality. If not for the large supply of spirit medicines and the assistance of the mysterious bottle, his cultivation might have come to a halt. What troubled him the most was the process of cultivating the 5 elemental powers and integrating them with the Yi essence-fused mountain. For several decades, he remained confined near the mountain, enduring hardships unknown to others. Without his caution, persistence, and steady mindset, he would not have been able to continue. Thus, he cultivated diligently within the spatial pocket for 200 years. In the end, he succeeded in refining the essence-fused mountain completely and incorporated it into his body as a treasured artifact. From that point onward, his progress became much smoother. Hanli chose an appropriate moment to consume the devil essence pills, along with other spirit medicines. With additional support from peak-grade spirit stones and the 5 glacial flames, he successfully broke through to the deity transformation stage. Now a deity transformation cultivator, Han Li could manipulate worldly origin qi and command wind and rain. His abilities were comparable to those of an immortal in the mortal world. His existence had fundamentally changed. Filled with quiet satisfaction, he left the valley and traveled to the scattered star seas. There he confirmed that Nangong Wan and his disciples were safe. His disciples had even established a considerable force, controlling dozens of nearby cultivator islands. Hanli did not place much importance on this development and remained indifferent. By that time, with the aid of the many medicinal pills Han Li had left for her, Nangong Wan had already reached the late nascent soul stage. She continued to cultivate diligently, aiming to reach the peak of that stage and attempt a breakthrough. Shijian, possessing exceptional aptitude, had also successfully formed a nascent soul after several hundred years, which brought Han Li some satisfaction. However, there had also been misfortune. As Mu Peiling's lifespan neared its end, she rushed to break through to the nascent soul stage. Due to her unstable state of mind, her inner demons caused a backlash of magic power, leading to her death. Upon hearing this, Han Li felt a trace of sorrow. He had previously given her supplementary medicine, refined from the 9-curl spirit ginseng, to aid her breakthrough. But such matters ultimately depended on fate. As she had been his nominal concubine, Han Li personally visited her grave. Afterward, he returned to the main island and spent over a decade quietly accompanying Nangong Wan before returning once more to the heavenly south, to continue his cultivation. Before departing, Han Li first brought Shijian back to the heavenly south so that he could travel to the far west and compete for leadership of the Thousand Bamboo School. Since Han Li had already informed Shijian about inheriting the legacy of monarch soul divergence, Shijian naturally had no objections. After returning to the heavenly south, Shijian set off for the far west on his own. With his current level of cultivation, taking control of the Thousand Bamboo School was a simple matter. Han Li had no concerns regarding this. As soon as Han Li returned to Devil Fall Valley, he immediately resumed cultivation. With the 3 transplantation techniques given to him by Feng Xi, the spirit medicines that had once been restricted within the spatial pocket could now be brought outside. As a result, the refinement of the Fuchsia Cloud Pill was no longer limited. Although the Fuchsia Cloud Pill was originally intended for nascent soul cultivators, its medicinal strength was exceptionally potent, making it highly effective even for deity transformation cultivators. With a steady supply of this pill, what had once been a difficult stage of early deity transformation cultivation progressed much more smoothly. After a full century of focused cultivation, Han Li reached the peak of the early deity transformation stage. At the same time, he brought the Azure Essence Sword art to its final stage, achieving complete mastery. At this point, continuing to consume Fuchsia Cloud Pills no longer produced any effect. Furthermore, due to the thin spiritual chi of the mortal world, it was impossible for him to advance into the mid-deity transformation stage. As a result, he ended his seclusion without hesitation. During this period, he had encountered several bottlenecks. Each time he used myriad distance talismans to contact the old eccentric Xianxia. Gradually, he also revealed part of the information Silver Moon had left for him. After many years of persistent searching, Xianxia finally located a usable spatial node. This discovery caused the remaining deity transformation cultivators to feel great relief. When Han Li learned of the news, he also shared in their satisfaction. Following this, Xianxia old eccentric Feng Old Devil Hu, an old demon Che, spent 100 years preparing before entering the spatial node together. However, not long afterward, 3 of the 4 primal soul lanterns they had left behind were extinguished. Only Old Devil Hu's lantern remained, but its light was extremely faint. Several days later, even his lantern went out. It was unclear whether Old Devil Hu had successfully ascended to the spirit realm, thereby severing the lantern's connection, or if he had perished within the spatial node. Later, Han Li received this information through a myriad distance talisman sent by the disciples of those great cultivators. He was deeply shocked. It became evident that the dangers within the spatial node were even greater than he had anticipated. Even deity transformation cultivators with such profound abilities had been completely wiped out. This left him uneasy. Silver Moon's warnings about the spatial nodes had not been exaggerated. It was indeed a path where survival was unlikely. Fortunately, Xianxia had honored his agreement and already provided Han Li with the location of the spatial node. There was no need for him to search for it himself. At present, since his cultivation could no longer advance further, Han Li planned to personally investigate the spatial node and make thorough preparations. The better prepared he was, the higher his chances of surviving the passage. The limited information conveyed through the myriad distance talisman was not something he could fully rely on. However, the spatial node was not located in the Great Jin, the heavenly south, or any other region he was familiar with. It lay within an unfamiliar area known as the 5 Dragon Seas. This region was rarely known even within the Great Jin. However, Xianxia and the others had discovered a teleportation formation that led directly there. To reach it, Han Li first needed to travel to the Great Jin. Since the journey would be long, he decided to visit the scattered star seas once more before departing. After making this decision, Han Li left his puppet behind to guard the spatial pocket and departed from Devil Fall Valley. On a small island with a pleasant landscape, several nascent soul cultivators were gathered inside a stone pavilion atop a mountain, engaged in an active discussion. An elderly man with white hair, dressed in wide grey robes, stroked his beard and smiled at a woman in green robes seated across from him. "Fairy Bai, I heard you successfully refined the sweet fragrance pill, a high-grade pill capable of purifying one's essence. I wonder if you would be willing to part with a few." Before she could respond, a middle-aged cultivator in blue robes laughed. "Brother Can, you must be joking. Everyone knows of your expertise in pill refinement. Why would you need a few sweet fragrance pills? If anything, I would like to exchange for some on behalf of my disciples." The old man showed no displeasure and replied with a smile. "Fellow Taoist, Zhao, you misunderstand. My expertise lies in pills that assist cultivation progress. Pills that enhance magical power fall outside my specialty. Since such an opportunity has appeared, I would naturally like to acquire some." The green-robed woman spoke calmly, her tone gentle. "There is no need to compete over them. We can simply conduct an exchange. I brought most of the sweet fragrance pills with me, enough for both of you. Please present what you wish to trade. I trust you will not disappoint me." The two men exchanged glances, both sighing inwardly before responding politely. This gathering was a small-scale trade meeting. Two other cultivators present had yet to speak. Seeing this, they smiled faintly. One of them, a large man with yellow-toned skin, placed a golden wooden box on the table and pushed it forward. He looked directly at the old man and spoke seriously. "This is something that fellow Taoist Sun and I obtained through considerable effort. I wish to exchange it for 2 of Brother Can's worm-shift pills. Only with those pills can my swift-winged python evolve into a worm." The old man frowned slightly and shook his head. "You did not mention this during the previous exchange. I cannot agree. I also require those pills for my own green spirit serpent." The man surnamed Fan smiled confidently. "There is no need to refuse so quickly. Take a look first, then decide." The old man hesitated, then said, "Unless it is something like the azure spirit mushroom, I will not agree, no matter how valuable it may be." Even so, he waved his hand and drew the box into his grasp. Upon opening it, he revealed a blue shimmering pearl. "A thunder whale's core," he exclaimed in surprise. The others were immediately startled and turned their attention toward them. Cultivator Fan grinned. "Brother Can truly has sharp eyes. It is indeed the demon core of a grade 7 thunder whale. Although it is only grade 7, such creatures are extremely rare. Fellow Taoist Sun and I pursued it for 3 full days to obtain it. What do you think now?" The old man stared at the core, clearly tempted, yet he also valued the worm-shift pills greatly. He hesitated, unable to decide. "The demon core of a thunder whale is indeed rare. May I take a look?" At that moment, a calm male voice sounded from outside the pavilion. None of the cultivators recognized it. "Who is there?" they asked, startled as they all looked outward. At some unknown time, a young man in azure robes had appeared outside the pavilion. His appearance was ordinary, but his eyes carried a sharp and composed clarity. The cultivators exchanged uncertain glances. None of them recognized him. Although the pavilion appeared unremarkable, it was protected by restrictions. Yet this man had entered unnoticed. Moreover, they could not detect any trace of magical power from him. Since it was impossible for a mortal to be present here, this only made the situation more uncertain. Cultivator Fan hesitated before cautiously asking, "May I ask who you are?" The young man cupped his hands in greeting. "There is no need for concern. I only came to ask for directions. If I have disturbed you, I ask for your understanding." This person was naturally Han Li, who had arrived in the 5 Dragon Seas. Unfamiliar with the region, he needed to understand the terrain and acquire a map. Although illusion formations were rare, they could not deceive his bright sight spirit eyes. After noticing a gathering of high-level cultivators, he had descended directly. "Directions." Cultivator Fan repeated, doubt evident on his face. "If any of you possess a map of the surrounding area, that would be most helpful," Han Li said calmly. He then glanced at the box and added with a faint smile, "As for that thunder whale core, it appears intact, but its demonic power has already dissipated. Even if used for pill refinement, its effectiveness would be limited." "Is that true? What nonsense!" The old man was startled. while Cultivator Fan's expression turned angry. Whether you believe me is your choice. I only spoke casually, Han Li said evenly. However, if you are willing to sell me a map, I can answer a few of your questions. I can also offer a Thunder Whale core as a gift. Although its grade is slightly lower, its medicinal properties will be superior. As he spoke, Han Li took out a larger, sparkling blue pearl. The cultivators in the pavilion were stunned. Their expressions varied, some showed disbelief, while others revealed clear interest, as they all stared at Han Li. Cultivator Fan finally tore his gaze away from the core in his hand. His expression darkened as he spoke sharply. Where exactly do you come from? Are you here to make a mockery of us?